Greetings, confessors. Welcome to this week's Midweek Refuel. I'm running a little behind this week and I'm in a different location, so I apologize for the late posting. If you are new to the Midweek Refuel, then I welcome you. You are very much wanted here. We study the scriptures and the great Christian writings throughout time in order to prepare ourselves and others for the spiritual warfare of today and of tomorrow. We are currently going through Augustine's Confessions. We are currently reading from Book 3, Chapter 1 and 2 of the Every Man's Library edition, but any additional work, and you can even find it on free. It's public domain. If you find this lesson encouraging and helpful in your spiritual walk and in your daily life, then I encourage you to look through the channel history called Orthopraxy, and there's a weekly jumpstart and a midweek refuel. If you look in the midweek refuel section, you'll find the series of Augustine's Confessions from the very beginning, and I hope that you will be blessed by today's short lesson. If you are, please help us out in this ministry by clicking the like or the rumble button, and think about giving us a spot in your subscription list. Every positive thing helps us to reach more people in the name of Jesus Christ, so we thank you for taking the time to do that. Let me know how we are doing in the comments section, or just make a comment. I like reading them, and we've received some things in the past that help us make this a better channel, and also a lot of encouragement. And I think anybody who has posted a line of encouragement, it means a lot to me. And I try to get to all of them, and while they're still of an amount that I can speak to all of them directly, I will try to do so. Anything that helps us minister better to you is a welcome recommendation. So we thank you for taking time for doing all those things. This particular chapter convicted me deeply. I found myself squirming in my chair a little as I read Augustine's assessment of the role of entertainment in our lives. I like entertainment. Who doesn't like entertainment? None of us have really known a time in which we haven't either been entertained or been within easy reach of entertainment. In fact, we are swamped with entertainment. Many of us keep headphones in our ears 24/7 in order to be entertained and to drown out our thoughts. Is there anything wrong with entertainment? Well, to be honest, I love entertainment so much that I hope there's not something wrong with every piece of entertainment. I would like to think that depends on the entertainment itself, wouldn't you? There are documentaries that I enjoy watching. Those documentaries entertain us while educating our minds and, in some cases, brainwashing our minds. There are novels such as Lord of the Rings, which richly bless us from the first page to the last, well over 1,000 pages. And while they're enriching us, they also entertain us. But there are also novels that seek to titillate and exacerbate our most base and lowly selves. The same can be said of TV programming and the internet channels. I catch up on politics through YouTube, Rumble, and other streaming services. I enjoy Bible teachings on these same services. I like listening to other pastors, especially when I'm preparing a sermon. I like to go out and find pastors who have preached on the same scripture out there and learn from them and add that to my own sermon. But I think if we're honest, let's be honest, we all know what the most visited and trafficked sites on the internet are, don't we? I have to admit that Augustine has put a different spin on the problem than I have ever given much thought. My own opinion over the years has been that some entertainment should be avoided by Christians, of course, but even that wasn't the main problem in my opinion. The main problem was that, good or bad, entertainment was a constant distraction from self-knowledge and spiritual contemplation. I've known this ever since I owned my first gigantic Walkman we attached to our hips. Looked like phonographs on our belts. But I remember being able to shut down all contemplation, shut down all inner seeking, shut down all uncomfortable thoughts. We have all either been or we have known someone who has music or TV distracting them every single moment of their life and of their day. And if the room goes silent for even a moment, We know those people that we can actually watch begin to shake and get uncomfortable with their own thought processes, beginning to fill the void, asking them the questions that they should have been asking for a long, long time. We have people who entertain themselves constantly and yet find themselves in need of medical help for depression. And while I believe there are some medical reasons for depression, I believe that much of it would be cured if that person were to distance themselves from all the distractions of life, sit and think through the uncomfortable things, and then use their God-given willpower to change those uncomfortable and depressing things. This was the problem as far as I had thought about it. But like I said, Augustine goes one further, and when he goes one further, I have to tell you, it rattled my cage a little bit. He calls what he is describing, and he has such a beautiful use of words, he calls what he is describing a spectacular madness. Entertainments are not only a distraction, according to Augustine, but more importantly, they are misspent and corrupted emotions, emotions that have gone astray and are used in non-productive ways. He says of those called, and like I say, I would like to believe this isn't the case all the time. If you're sitting down and reading Tolstoy, I'd like to think that enriches you. But Augustine's shaken me so badly in this week's reading that I even draw that into question. Like I said at the beginning, I want us to be honest with ourselves. And many times that's hard, but it is always productive and always leads to the joy of the Lord. So let's try. He says of those caught up in a live play, quote, "The less free each spectator is of these emotions, the more he is moved to pity them in others. Although when he himself undergoes these sufferings, his plight is said to be pathetic. But when he shares those of others, he is said to be sympathetic." He continues in the same paragraph, quote, "As a member of the audience, he is not called on to help the characters, but merely invited to suffer. The more he suffers, the more he applauds the actor who has undergone these imaginary troubles," unquote. He ends our section by asking us, or himself, more importantly, was such a life at all, my God? Unquote. That'll move you to tears, won't it? Quite the question. We sit in front of the tube or behind the virtual reality mask, and we experience virtual love, virtual hate, virtual turmoil, virtual horror, virtual sympathy, pity, and every other conceivable emotion available to mankind. But they cost us nothing, except perhaps the ticket price of admission. We are only affected in the real world by our appreciation for how well the medium in question has caused us momentary and fictional emotional highs. I don't know about you, but I am truly surprised that Augustine, before TV, before internet, before radio, before phonograph, before Walkmans, before iPods, before anything other than live plays and board games and, of course, the arena, finds himself so tormented by things that surround us so completely that we don't even notice them or give them a second thought anymore in most cases. Actually, we are so surrounded by them that we rarely have the time or mental space to analyze them and give them a second thought. We are truly the ribbit frogs at the bottom of the boiling water, aren't we? In more ways than just entertainment, unfortunately, in this society. I remember one CIA director saying that the misinformation campaign would be complete when everything Americans believed was inaccurate. I wonder if we're there. Augustine begins this particular discussion of entertainments by addressing what he calls love. And I say that for a reason. He never calls it eros, but the tone of the chapters would have me believe that he is talking about eros or talking about physical attraction and the excitement of romantic love more than he is talking about any deep and meaningful, spiritual, lasting love. He says, quote, "I was not yet in love, but I was in love with love. Such was my inner need that I hated myself for not being more in need," unquote. He continues, quote, "For this reason, my soul was sick, covered with sores. It turned itself outwards, pathetically eager to scratch itself with the touch of sensible objects." And I believe that by sensible, he means not logical, but through the senses, or what we would call sensual objects. Instead of turning inward and searching the soul and the heart to know thyself and to know thy God for their true desires, to know the heart for its true desires, he turns his attention, just like we do, to the things that please the carnal senses to overwhelm the body and mind with the pleasures of feeding the flesh. That's what a pride parade is. The pride parade is all about they've given up any spiritual or introspection for the pride of life, either through romantic love or through an excess of fictional, emotional outlets. Let's face it, we love to be scared, except for when we are scared, truly scared. We love roller coasters and we love horror movies because they scare us, but when the gunman is at the door or the demon is made manifest, we would quickly realize that true horror is not so enjoyable. When we feel pity or sympathy for a character in a movie, we are moved to joyful tears within that delusion. But how many of us actually feel that uncomfortable sympathy and that uncomfortable pity, which would coax us and move us into loving action for our brothers and sisters who are trapped in sin and heading to hell each day? Augustine doesn't bring it up, but this discussion has made me ask myself a further question regarding these entertainments and distractions. Is it emotional masturbation? And if so, does it, like sexual masturbation, reduce and redirect what would have been normal, hormonal, emotional, spiritual, and mental dictates had we not spent the physical and, yes, metaphysical energies in useless and fictional imaginations that accomplish nothing but a temporary high as the roller coaster hits the fan? Does an abundance of imaginary outlets in some way strip us of the mental and spiritual power that we need to truly live loving and healthy lives before man and before God? Anyone who is addicted to porn shows through the studies, and the studies have been done, to have a measurable deficiency in their ability to enjoy real sex. Does a drama addict lose their ability to suffer with other real humans and feel for real people the way God intends us to? I would assume that an addiction to one thing is very much like an addiction to the other and has similar effects. I would assume that it does. We live in a world that kills babies, celebrates killing babies, has marches on the streets demanding that we have the right to kill babies, and celebrates sodomy, a twisting of love. Surely something has gone terribly wrong with our minds and our being in the world properly, as the philosophers say. We enjoy watching on TV and the internet things that we would never wish upon ourselves or others in actuality, don't we? I'm not pointing the finger at you. Ask anyone who knows me if they have that misfortune. I have spent my life in books and am more easily moved to tears by Dostoevsky and The Ridiculous Man than I am by the homeless person I drive by on my way to pick up my pizza for movie night. Augustine has stuck a sword in my heart with today's reading, and I wonder if that's okay. And I question my own excuses for it all. I question my own excuses for, at times, being emotionally distant from reality while close to entertainment. Let us turn to Book 3, chapters 1 and 2, starting on page 45 of the Everyman's Library edition. It's a short reading today, but I hope that, like me, you have underlined nearly every sentence in preparation for today's study. Look at that. It's just blue ink on there. At first glance, these two chapters are deceptively simple at first glance. I hope you read over it a couple of times as you search your own heart and look at your own habits and your own introspection and your own time that you give yourself in your day for your mind to work properly and to ask the larger questions in life, the difficult questions, the questions that cause us at the end of the day to stand before the cross of Jesus Christ and to understand the joy of suffering with Him. Augustine's warning penetrates me like a flaming sword. I hope you find yourself cut in today's reading. I came to Carthage, and a frying pan of sinful loves was spitting all about me. I was not yet in love, but I was in love with love. Such was my inner need that I hated myself for not being more in need. I was looking for something to love, in love with love, and hating the safety of a path free from pitfalls. For inside I was starving for lack of inner food, you, my God. And yet, starving as I was, I felt no hunger. I felt no lack of the foods that do not perish, not because I was full of them, but because the more empty I was, the more nauseating I found them. For this reason, my soul was sick. Covered with sores, it turned itself outwards, pathetically eager to scratch itself with the touch of sensible objects. But if these objects had no soul, they would not be lovable. Loving and being loved was sweeter to me if I could also enjoy my lover's body. So it was that I defiled the well of friendship with the filth of concupiscence and clouded its clear light with the infernal fog of lust. Crude and boorish as I was, my vanity was so excessive that I longed to be smart and sophisticated. I rushed headlong into love, seeking to be swallowed up in it. O God, ever merciful to me, what gall you in your goodness smeared over my sophisticated pleasures, for I was loved in return and came secretly to know the chains of carnal enjoyment. Gladly I was enmeshed in those bonds of woe, and let myself be beaten with iron rods, blazing with jealousy and suspicions, with fears, anger, and quarrels. I was carried away by the pageantry of the theater, full of reflections of my own miseries and of kindling for the fire that was consuming me. Why is it that a man at the theater wants to suffer as he watches those tales of tragedy and woe, woes which, however, he would not wish to undergo himself? He is, however, willing to undergo the suffering he derives from them as a spectator, and this suffering is itself a pleasure. What is all this but the most spectacular madness? The less free each spectator is of these emotions, the more he is moved to pity them in others. Although when he himself undergoes these sufferings, his plight is said to be pathetic. But when he shares those of others, he is said to be sympathetic. But what sympathy can a man have with the fictional productions of the stage? As a member of the audience, he is not called on to help the characters, but merely invited to suffer. The more he suffers, the more he applauds the actor who has undergone these imaginary troubles. And if those tales of human woe are acted in such a way that the spectator does not suffer, perhaps because they are old-fashioned or untrue, then he leaves the show in disgust, criticizing the performance. But if he does suffer, Then he stays in rapt attention and rejoices amid his tears. Are sufferings then objects of love? It is certain, at all events, that every man wishes to be happy. Or is it that although no one enjoys being pitiable, nevertheless everyone enjoys being sympathetic, which is impossible without suffering? For which reason and no other, sufferings are objects of love? This too springs from the well of friendship that I have spoken of. But where does it go? Where does it flow? Why does it become, as it runs down, a torrent of boiling pitch, a loathsome broil of foul lust, into which it is changed and transformed by its own will, warped and cast down from the clear skies of heaven? Are we then to reject sympathy? Far be it. Are we then to love suffering? Sometimes. But beware, my soul, of impurity under the watchful care of my God, the God of our fathers, praised and exalted on high throughout all ages. Beware of impurity. It is not that I do not pity now, but in those days at the theater, I rejoiced with the lovers when they had sinful enjoyment of each other, notwithstanding the fact that their deeds were imaginary in all parts of the show. And when they lost each other, I grieved with them as if in sympathy. But in both joy and grief there was pleasure. Now, however, I pity more one who rejoices in sin than one who, enduring hardship, is bereft of the pleasure that leads to destruction and loses the happiness that leads to misery. This surely is truer sympathy, but there is no pleasure in it. For even if we commend one who grieves for another's sufferings and say that he performs a duty of friendship, nevertheless, he who shows true brotherly sympathy would rather have no cause to grieve. If there is such a thing as ill-willed goodwill, which is impossible, then it is possible for one who truly and sincerely feels pity to wish that others may suffer, so that he can pity them. Some sorts of suffering, then, are to be commended, but none is to be loved. For in this respect, you, Lord God, lover of souls, show pity that is far purer than ours, far more incorruptible. You are assailed by no suffering. And who is capable of these things? But I, pitiable as I then was, loved suffering and sought causes for it. The more tears an actor shook out of me, the better I liked him, and the more I admired his performance, albeit the troubles he enacted were none of my own, unreal and mere pantomime. What, however, is surprising in this, seeing as I was an unhappy sheep straying from your flock, impatient of your safekeeping, and afflicted with a loathsome mange? That was the source of my love of sorrows, not the kind that pierced me at all deeply, for I did not love to endure the sort of things I loved to watch, but the fictitious kind that I loved to hear, which only grazed me skin deep, but like the scratches of nails, they led to burning inflammation, infection, and foul purulence. Was such a life at all, my God? Was such a life at all, my God? Good question. When we get to heaven and the IMAX of our lives are displayed before us, will the projection happen from the viewpoint of our own eyes? And if so, will we see the people that we have loved and that have loved us? Or will we see nothing but Mr. Robot, Archie Bunker, Captain America, and Indiana Jones? Many times this year, I have been captivated by 2 Corinthians instructions to Christians to cast down imaginations in the name of Christ. I have thought of that verse as I have watched people put experience over knowledge I have thought of that verse as I have watched the charismatic movements and the deliverance ministries movements abuse the scriptures to validate their own imaginations. I have watched an entire nation go to hell as those who imagine that they are a different sex than God created them to be. I have watched media be transformed by an imaginary definition of love. We are on the brink of World War III because of the imaginations of madmen who have lost their minds with power and demand that Russia shares in the delusion. But now, after reading this, I wonder if it didn't start a long, long time ago. Perhaps in the theaters of Rome. Perhaps it was when Bell and Edison discovered how to capture the imagination in such a way as to distribute it into every home. How about the internet? How about when the internet allowed the possibility of allowing every madness and every imagination of every human being on earth to scale the Tower of Babel once again and infect us all with their insane imaginations? Who knows? What I do know is this: through an act of self-will and the promise and empowerment of Jesus Christ, you can cast down every imagination and every high thing that exalteth itself before Jesus Christ and your Maker, and make them obedient to Christ. And in making them obedient to Christ, make them obedient to your will and the power that Christ gives you in this life. You will have victory over them and freedom from them. Not bad. Christ is King. Hail to the King.